When I bought the farm just beyond Oakwood Estates, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for quiet. 40 acres of golden fields, a rust-red barn, and a modest farmhouse shaded by sycamores. After 10 years in corporate hell, I wanted open skies, honest work, and a place where no one cared what kind of boots you wore or how loud your rooster crowed. But peace has predators. And mine came in the form of Karen Benton. Karen was the HOA president for Oakwood Estates, the luxury development that bordered my eastern fence line. She ran the neighborhood like a country club, strict lawn heights, pre-approved paint colors, and noise ordinances so specific they could have been written by librarians. The first time I met her, I was repairing my gate. She marched right up the gravel drive like she owned it, her heels crunching over dust like gunfire. "You the new owner?" she asked, nose wrinkled. I nodded.
Yep.
Jack Strayer. She looked past me at the hay bales stacked unevenly on the porch and the diesel-stained tractor near the barn. "Just so you're aware, this land borders a very high-value residential zone. Property values are delicate." I leaned on the fence. "So is livestock. Don't worry, my pigs don't gossip and my chickens don't throw parties." She didn't laugh, just turned and walked off, mumbling something about rural trash. I shrugged it off. People like Karen always need something to hate. It gives them purpose. I figured she'd move on once she realized I kept my fields tidy and my business to myself. I underestimated her. It started 2 months later. A buzzing sound, high-pitched, intermittent, echoed over my corn rows. I squinted at the sky. A drone, small and sleek, hovered just above my greenhouse. It dipped low, camera glinting, then zipped away toward the HOA neighborhood. Odd, but I chalked it up to a curious teenager. The next day, another one came. Then another. Different models, same behavior. Lingering above my coops, swooping close to my barn, hovering shamelessly outside my bedroom window before vanishing into the blue. By week's end, it was a routine invasion. Morning chores became a game of dodge and ignore. The goats hated the noise. The horses spooked. I had to replace 2 fence panels when a panicked colt barreled through them. I called the sheriff. He came out, took a statement, then sighed. Technically, drones have legal access to airspace above private property. If they're not armed, trespassing, or recording inside your home, there's not much we can do. "But they are recording," I protested. "They've been filming for days." "Then file a civil complaint," he said. "But it won't stop them flying." I didn't have to file anything. 3 days later, I caught her. One of the drones had dipped lower than usual, brushing the barn roof. I followed it with my binoculars. It flew straight to a 3rd-floor balcony overlooking the HOA's edge and landed smoothly in Karen Benton's hands. She didn't flinch. She knew I saw her. I drove to her house the next morning. She met me at the door like she was expecting a package. "Mr. Strayer, I assume this is about the monitoring?" "Spying, you mean?" She offered a tight smile. "The HOA has concerns. There have been reports of odors, pests, and noise violations. We're simply documenting potential environmental threats." "This is my land," I said coldly. "Not part of your jurisdiction." "It affects the community," she said, stepping forward. "And community interests come first." Her eyes were calm, calculating. She wanted me angry, wanted me to lose it so she could spin a narrative. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I turned, walked away, and promised myself something. If she wanted a war, I'd give her one. But it wouldn't be fought with angry words or legal loopholes. It would be fought with silence, patience, and something she'd never expect. The morning after our confrontation, Karen's drones returned, this time in greater numbers. 3 of them flew in formation like little sentinels, patrolling the skies above my fields with military precision. Their synchronized hum echoed through the valley like a warning bell. I tried to ignore them, but they made themselves impossible to forget, dipping low over the stables, weaving through the orchard, and stalling overhead as if sniffing for dirt. They weren't curious anymore. They were watching, documenting, targeting. One buzzed so low over the goat pen that it startled Lucy, my border collie. She barked and chased it, colliding into the fence post hard enough to limp for days. That night, I found her lying by the porch with her head on her paws, flinching every time the wind shifted. She'd been my loyal farmhand for 5 years. Watching her tremble over a toy with wings flipped a switch inside me. I marched back to Karen's house before sunrise. She met me on the porch wearing a silk robe and sipping espresso from a bone-white cup. "They're upsetting my animals," I said, fists clenched. "You've made your point. Call them off." She gave a condescending tilt of her head. "Our documentation is within legal bounds. Perhaps if your operation didn't cause so much disruption, we would need aerial observation." "Disruption?" I asked, incredulous. She waved vaguely toward the horizon. "Odors. Dust. An unsightly compost bin near the property line. My residents are concerned. I'm simply preserving quality of life." I stared at her, jaw clenched. "You're harassing me." Her lips curled slightly. "I'm protecting the community." I turned and walked away. But I wasn't defeated. I was calculating. She'd made her mistake, believing I was just some dirt-covered farmer with no bite behind my bark. But she didn't know my background. She didn't know I'd once worked for an aerospace contractor, that I'd spent a decade learning the ins and outs of radio systems, signal interference, and drone telemetry. I didn't want war, but I knew how to win one. That night, I dusted off my old notebooks and logged into the tech forums I hadn't touched in years. I researched consumer drone frequencies, GPS overrides, and electromagnetic shielding. I even called up an old colleague from my engineering days and posed a hypothetical. If someone wanted to disrupt a swarm of drones without affecting nearby communications, how might they go about it? He laughed. "A jammer, obviously. But that's FCC territory. Big fines if you get caught." "Hypothetically," I replied. He paused. "Hypothetically? You'd build a narrow-band signal disruptor. Short range. Passive defense. Trigger it when they enter your space." That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I drove an hour out to a surplus electronics dealer on the edge of town and stocked up on what I needed: copper wire, capacitors, microcontrollers, and a high-gain directional antenna that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. Over the next few nights, I built it piece by piece in the workshop behind my barn, with only Lucy for company and a half-empty pot of black coffee at my side. When I finally powered it on and tested it on a decoy drone, the results were instant. The drone hovered, twitched, and dropped like a stone into a haystack. The device worked. Clean. Silent. Localized. Exactly what I needed. I installed it in the hayloft, set the activation range to a tight 200-foot radius, and waited. 2 days later, the drones returned. As they entered the boundary, I flipped the switch. The lead drone jolted midair and spiraled downward, crashing into the soft soil near the irrigation ditch. A second stuttered, lost altitude, and slammed into the roof of the chicken coop. The third tried to retreat but froze in place and tumbled into the corn. It was like watching vultures fall from the sky. I walked into the field, found their broken bodies, and gathered them into a pile like firewood. My pulse was steady, my breath calm. For the first time in weeks, the air was still. From the HOA balcony, I saw her. Karen stood motionless, phone in hand, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. I tipped my hat. The silence that followed was more satisfying than any apology. But I knew her type. She wasn't done, and neither was I. The day after I brought her drones down, Karen disappeared. No morning patrols. No HOA clipboard rounds. No passive-aggressive strolls near the property line. Her absence was louder than her presence, like the eye of a storm pretending to be peace. I wasn't fooled. Instead of drones, she sent letters. The first one came in a white envelope with gold HOA lettering. Inside, a cease and desist notice accusing me of malicious interference with community safety operations. No return address. No signature. Just legalese vomited onto embossed paper. The second came certified, stamped by some overpriced lawyer in town. It threatened litigation. Claimed I was endangering aerial assets critical to community surveillance. Apparently, Karen had rebranded her harassment as a public service. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My land wasn't part of the HOA. Her authority stopped at the fence. But that didn't stop her. 3 days later, I came home to find county code enforcement parked in my driveway. 2 inspectors stood next to their truck, arms folded, pointing at the compost pile near the fence line. One stepped forward with a clipboard. "Sir, we've received reports of improper waste storage and environmental runoff." I raised an eyebrow. "From who?" He flipped the paper. "A neighborhood representative. Claimed it poses a health risk to adjacent properties." I glanced toward Oakwood Estates. Karen's balcony door was open. Of course. I walked them around, showed them the containment bins, the barriers, the drainage trench I dug last season. Everything was up to spec, cleaner than most county farms. They left with 4 smiles and a thin apology. Karen wasn't trying to win. She was trying to wear me down. A new truck drove by every day, unmarked, always slowing by my barn. One had tinted windows. Another had a dish antenna mounted on top. Surveillance? Or just theater? Either way, it rattled the animals. Lucy barked more than she slept. The goats stopped eating. My tractor battery was mysteriously dead 3 mornings in a row. I kept working. Fences needed mending. Crops needed tending. But under my breath, I was plotting. She wanted to make me a villain. I'd give her a legend. I started recording everything: drones, trucks, inspectors. I documented every infraction, every false claim. I installed trail cameras around the property, hidden in birdhouses and fence posts. My farm was becoming a fortress, not of wood and wire, but of evidence and resolve. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, she crossed the line. Literally. I caught movement on the southeast camera, a flash of tan slacks stepping over the property line, weaving through the trees behind my barn. Not a drone. A person. I pulled up the footage. Zoomed in. It was Karen. She carried a tablet. She crouched near the fence, snapped photos, then walked deeper, past the blackberry bushes, past the irrigation pipe, right up to my equipment shed. Trespassing. I downloaded the footage, timestamped everything, and burned it to 3 separate drives. That evening, I paid a visit to the sheriff. When I handed him the flash drive, he popped it into his laptop and leaned forward. His expression darkened as the footage played. "She went onto your land?" he asked. "Uninvited. With recording equipment." He scratched his chin. "That's criminal trespass minimum. Maybe unlawful surveillance. If she accessed your sheds, could even be attempted theft. I want to press charges." He nodded slowly. "I'll have a deputy swing by her residence. We'll open a case." I left the station with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Momentum. By nightfall, word had spread. Karen's high and mighty persona cracked like an egg dropped on concrete. Several HOA residents posted anonymously online, admitting they'd grown tired of her vendetta. One even emailed me, thanking me for standing your ground and reminding her this isn't a dictatorship. Still, I wasn't naive. Karen didn't build her power on kindness. She built it on intimidation, bureaucracy, and fear. She wouldn't go down without a final act. And I had a hunch it would be spectacular. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the last light slip behind the hills, I felt the storm building again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The next morning began like the calm before a firestorm, too quiet, too still. Lucy paced the porch with uneasy steps, ears flicking toward the treetops. Birds scattered from the eastern grove as a mechanical whine stirred the morning haze. Then I saw them, 5 drones, bigger than before, dark gray with blinking red lights. These weren't the lightweight consumer toys Karen had previously deployed. These were professional-grade UAVs, outfitted with stabilizers and what looked like thermal lenses. She wasn't just pushing boundaries now. She was declaring war. They fanned out, circling low and slow above my crops, dipping close enough to ruffle the wheat stalks. One hovered above the barn's roof, scanning. Another paused over the goat pen, where the animals huddled near the shelter in terror. I could see it now. Karen was escalating for effect, pushing for a reaction she could spin as aggression. Well, she was going to get one. I walked into the hayloft, opened the access panel, and powered up the signal jammer. It hummed to life like a sleeping beast awakened, emitting a focused electromagnetic pulse across a tight frequency band. One by one, the drones spasmed in the air, lost orientation, and spiraled down like dead leaves. 3 crashed in the field. 1 hit the barn wall and exploded in sparks. The last landed nose first in the compost pile it had once surveilled. I stood in the silence that followed, 5 machines down, the air finally clear again. Then came the sirens. 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled up fast, lights flashing but no urgency in their motion. I recognized the deputy who stepped out, Jackson, the same one the sheriff had promised would visit Karen. He looked up at the downed drones, then at me. "You really don't do anything halfway, do you?" he muttered, half amused. "She escalated," I said. "I defended my property, and I've got every step of it recorded." He gestured toward the barn. "Mind if we take a look?" I led him to the crash sites, explaining everything, the low-frequency jamming, the limited range, the protective intent. I handed over the footage of Karen trespassing, her drones harassing the animals, and copies of her lawyer's letters. Jackson whistled softly. "Looks like she's crossed into felony territory now. Privacy invasion, criminal mischief, unauthorized surveillance. We'll be filing charges today." "Good," I said, "because this ends now." But it didn't end with the sheriff. That afternoon, the story exploded. Local news picked it up first. Farmer defends land against HOA drone invasion. Then regional media caught wind. Footage of the drone crashes went viral, stitched together with dramatic narration and titles like David vs. HOA Goliath and Farm Wars, Karen's Last Flight. Within days, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. And this time I showed up. Karen sat at the head of the community center table, flanked by her usual gallery of bootlickers. But the room wasn't on her side anymore. Dozens of residents had filled the seats, murmuring, passing phones, pointing at her with narrowed eyes. I walked in with a folder of printed evidence under one arm, a flash drive in the other, and Lucy trotting at my heel. Karen stood the moment she saw me. "This meeting is for HOA members only," she snapped. A board member interrupted. "Actually, given recent developments, we voted to make this a public hearing." Karen paled. I stepped forward and laid everything on the table, her drone violations, the fabricated complaints, the trespassing footage. I said nothing inflammatory. I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. When I finished, a man in a blazer, the HOA treasurer, stood up and cleared his throat. "Given the overwhelming evidence," he said, "the board moves to censure Chairwoman Karen Sloan pending a full investigation. We will also suspend all HOA surveillance activity effective immediately." The room erupted in applause. Karen's face collapsed in a mixture of fury and disbelief. For the first time since our war began, she had no script, no authority, no escape hatch. She gathered her purse and stormed out without a word. And just like that, the drones were grounded. The air over my farm remained still in the weeks that followed. No more buzzing. No more flashing eyes in the sky. Just the wind through the wheat, the bray of a goat, and the steady breath of peace hard-won. I didn't start this fight, but I ended it. Because when someone turns the sky against you, you learn how to bring it down. And when they spy on your land from above, it's only fair you make them fall from it.